Shapeshifters, Lola's theme, released originally in 2003, but then licensed up by Positiva with new vocals added for that huge commercial release in 2004. The track was written after Simon Marlin, one half of the Shapeshifters duo, was listening to some of the songs in his wife's record collection. So the title is actually referring to her, Lola. It was Lola's record collection that he was listening through. Lola also appears in the video selling candy floss. See if you can spot her.
What an absolute classic this is.
Walking around in disguise. I was just a lost soul, I needed a guide. And the moment that you came to change my life, put me back together, you fired my heart and made me smile. You and I know that I'm a different person. Yeah, turn my world around. I'm a different person. Yeah, turn my world around. I'm a different person. Yeah, turn my world around.
There she is.
Let's leave it there. My mate, Lee Verne, once told me that all he could hear was, I want a breakfast roll. Now that's all I can ever hear when I listen to Lola's theme. I want a breakfast roll.
I'm a different person.
Yeah, I'm a different
It's one of those
person
ones
now.
where you're like, I'm
a
under
breakfast roll.
pressure.
Breakfast roll. How do you feel about fun fairs, mate? They really freak the fuck out of me. They're like audio visual rape. There's too many bright, grotesque colours, the music that bleeds into each other from all the rides and all the fucking boomboxes. I feel violated, and that's before the anxiety of shitty rides that I'm petrified to die on, or at least lose limbs, and also being ripped off for overpriced sugary treats, mate. Where are you on the fucking fun fair banter?
Well, I'm scared of travellers, so that's where that starts. Got a little bit of the old gypsy fear. I fear
Annie's.
I fear and respect them. That episode of The Simpsons has done me no good. The Carney Code. Not a massive fan because I feel those shiny lights are like a fucking light bulb to like a moth. When it comes to scallies and fun fairs, it's just all the rough kids. When you were young, if you wanted to get punched in the face by some cunt from another school, go the fair.
So we saw Lola selling a bit of candy floss there. If you're watching this, drop a link in the comments below with your favourite cameo in a music video. That's anyone you like who pops up in a music video you maybe not expecting to see. Drop the link to the video and who's making the guest appearance in the comments below, and me and Dan will pick someone at random to give them 12 months free access to our Patreon account. And if you want more exclusive content from us, go and check out our Patreon account. It's linked below. Lola's theme topped the UK and US charts and propelled the Shapeshifters to worldwide success, and they're still enjoying that today. So let's find out what was in Lola's record collection. I'm Felix Leiter, international DJ and producer.
My name's Dan Nightingale from the Have a Word podcast.
And together we're going to explore the samples that feature in tracks you love in a show that we like to call
Show Me the Sample.
Johnnie Taylor, What About My Love? Released in 1982 by the Philosopher of Soul, Johnnie grew up and performed in gospel groups around his home state of Arkansas in the United States. In 1966, he signed with Stax Records in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's where he was given the Philosopher of Soul nickname. Who have you given nicknames to on Have a Word? Like, who have you given the best nickname to that's stuck? If it's been a guest or if it's been one of the...
Well, Carl, because when Carl came back from Japan, and we were like, oh, what's the name of a teacher in Japan? And he was like, oh, it's Carl Sensei. And we were like, oh, Sensei Carl. And he was like, no, it's Carl Sensei. And you're like, no, that doesn't sound as good. Sensei Carl. And that has stuck so well. He's changed his Twitter handle. Everyone calls him Sensei. So, yeah, we fucking nailed that.
Not one of his biggest hits, mate, but you'll hear the sample from the very beginning of the track. A lovely musical sample, the strings, they hang the whole record off that sample, mate. And the original release was basically an instrumental of that, just with a couple of vocal phrases from a different track. The Shapeshifters did arrange these vocal phrases into a different order to give it a different feel. Now let's listen to the track that they sampled those original vocal phrases from. That is Anthony White, Love Me Tonight, Gomez Rocks the Joint mix, which was released in 1994. It was caned by DJs like Alistair Whitehead and Frankie Knuckles at the time. The vocals were actually sampled from an a cappella by Imarri called Let Me Love You, released in 1993 on Project X Records based out of New York City. Hit me with your thoughts on those ones, mate, before I tell you what I think.
Nicely done. I can see why they pulled that. I'll tell you what about Lola. Got a pretty cool taste in music. But yeah, I could see why you'd hear that that first bit of music and think that could be sampled beautifully. I think it was done nicely.
Before I talk on like the sample, my thoughts on it, this is a great example of going back to something. It's kind of a bit of a lost art in dance music these days. It's a great example of how a hype was built around a track when there was limited availability of it. So that first instrumental version that was released before it was like before more vocals were added for the big commercial release, people like Pete Tong were playing it on the radio for a good, I would say like 5 or 6 months, maybe even longer, before you could even get your hands on it. And then it was like, there was so much more control over music like back then, in the sense that you could press up maybe like, 100 copies of something and they could get sent to the most influential record shops around the country, flying in Newcastle, 3Beat in Liverpool. And they were given to the most influential DJs in that city, the guys that were playing Shindig or were playing Cream or playing Ministry or playing the Archers in Glasgow. And they were getting played to, thousands of people, and people go, what's this fucking record? You can't go out and Google it. You can't Shazam it. It's not on YouTube. It's not on Spotify. And the hype around a record was just sort of building slowly and organically for months and months and months. And by the time that they already knew, the music industry's changed in the way that sort of, they already knew that was going to be a hit by the time that Positiva licensed it up, i.e. to a bigger label. They added new vocals. They already sort of knew they had a hit on their hands because of the reaction to it over the previous 6, 9, 12 months. Whereas now, a lot of record labels basically just put records out and see what works. And then if something starts to build traction, then it kind of becomes a hit that way. Whereas, back in those times, it was just sort of much more of a longer process to try and build hype on it. And they had so many more controls over who had the music, how many versions were going out there. Because, again, if you had it on vinyl, that was the only way you could play it. You couldn't DJ it by transferring it to a different data source or whatever. So yeah, it was one of those records. It was probably one of the last really famous ones that worked like that. Like sample wise, again, I think it's absolutely beautiful. Those strings are so organic. And they build the whole track around it. It has a real, it kind of, I suppose, it was verging on that funky house era of like Head Candy and all that kind of really good feel good records, dipping back into the disco days. The vocal cuts are really cool. They were obviously taken from the a cappella, and the guys, the Shapeshifters, used a female vocalist called Cookie, who was the vocalist who was featured in the video, who was sitting in the booth singing into the microphone. She was a former member of the London Community Gospel Choir, and she wrote more lyrics for the commercial release of the track. He's been Dan Nightingale.
He's been Felix Leiter.
Thanks for watching.